What's up, party people? It's Keys Dan with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com, coming to you live and in living color from the Radio What studios. And this is my podcast, What Makes You Smarter? It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, where do you go? DJLittleRock.com. Check availability and get a free price quote. And maybe you can have me at your next event, playing for you on the digital wheels of steel. Yes, I play music for people. And I do karaoke shows. If you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Use the hashtag #WhatMakesYouFamous to find it everywhere. Let's learn together on What Makes You Smarter. Now, on with the show. Today on the program, cloud seeding. I've always been fascinated with cloud seeding and the ability for humans to control the weather. You know, one of the conspiracies that I fully believe is plausible is that perhaps some entity in the government, somewhere in the world, some government, some entity can control the weather somewhat. I know cloud seeding has been something that's been in my purview for quite some time. So I'd like to know a little bit more about cloud seeding. Cloud seeding is a type of weather modification that aims to change the amount of or type of precipitation that falls from clouds by dispersing substances into the air that serve as cloud condensation or ice nuclei, which alter the microphysical processes within the cloud. The usual intent is to increase precipitation, rain, or snow, but hail and fog suppression are also widely practiced in airports where harsh weather conditions are experienced. Cloud seeding also occurs due to ice nucleators in nature, most of which are bacterial in origin. Methodology? The most common chemicals used for cloud seeding include silver iodide, potassium iodide, and dry ice, solid carbon dioxide. Liquid propane, which expands into a gas, has also been used. This can produce ice crystals at higher temperatures than silver iodide. After promising research, the use of hygroscopic materials such as table salt is becoming more popular. When cloud seeding, increased snowfall takes place when temperatures within the clouds between -4 and 19 degrees Fahrenheit, that's -20 and -7 degrees Celsius, introduction of a substance such as silver iodide, which has a crystalline structure similar to that of ice, will induce freezing nucleation. In mid-altitude clouds, the usual seeding strategy has been based on the fact that the equilibrium vapor pressure is lower over ice than over water. The formation of ice particles in supercooled clouds allows those particles to grow at the expense of liquid droplets. If sufficient growth takes place, the particles become heavy enough to fall as precipitation from clouds that otherwise would produce no precipitation. The process is known as static seeding. Seeding of warm season or tropical cumulonimbus convective clouds seeks to exploit the latent heat released by freezing. This strategy of dynamic seeding assumes that the additional latent heat adds buoyancy, strengthens updrafts, ensures more low-level convergence, and ultimately causes rapid growth of properly selected clouds. Cloud seeding chemicals may be dispersed by aircraft or by dispersion devices located on the ground, generators or canisters fired from anti-aircraft guns or rockets. For release by aircraft, silver iodide flares are ignited and dispersed as an aircraft flies through the inflow of a cloud. When released by devices on the ground, the fine particles are carried downwind and upward by air currents after release. An electronic mechanism was tested in 2010 when infrared laser pulses were directed to the air above Berlin by researchers from the University of Geneva. Experimenters posited that the pulses would encourage atmospheric sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide to form particles that would then act as seeds. Effectiveness. Whether cloud seeding is effective in producing a statistically significant increase in participation is still a matter of academic debate, with contrasting results depending on the study in question and contrasting opinion among experts. A study conducted by the National Academy of Sciences failed to find statistically significant support for the effectiveness of cloud seeding. Based on the report's findings, Stanford University ecologist Rob Jackson said, quote, "I think you can squeeze out a little more snow or rain in some places under some conditions, but that's quite different from a program claiming to reliably increase precipitation," end quote. Data similar to that of the NAS study was acquired in a separate study conducted by the Wyoming Weather Modification Pilot Project. However, whereas the NAS study concluded that, quote, "it is difficult to show clearly that cloud seeding has a very large effect," end quote, but the WWMPP study concluded that, quote, "seeding could augment the snowpack by a maximum of 3% over an entire season," end quote. In 2003, the National Research Council, NRC, released a report stating, quote, "science is unable to say with assurance which, if any, seeding techniques produce positive effects. In the 55 years following the first cloud seeding demonstrations, substantial progress has been made in understanding the natural processes that account for our daily weather. Yet scientifically acceptable proof for significant seeding effects has not been achieved," end quote. A 2010 Tel Aviv University study claimed that the common practice of cloud seeding to improve rainfall with materials such as silver iodide and frozen carbon dioxide seems to have little, if any, impact on the amount of precipitation. A 2011 study suggested that airplanes may produce ice particles by freezing cloud droplets that cool as they flow around the tips of propellers, over wings, or over jet aircraft, and thereby unintentionally seed clouds. This could have potentially serious consequences for particular hailstone formation. However, Jeff Tilley, director of weather modification at the Desert Research Institute in Reno, claimed in 2016 that new technology and research has produced reliable results that make cloud seeding a dependable and affordable water supply practice for many regions. Moreover, in 1998, the American Meteorological Society held that, quote, "precipitation from supercooled orographic clouds that develop over mountains, has been seasonally increased by about 10%, end quote." Despite the mixed scientific results, cloud seeding was attempted during the 2008 Summer Olympics in Beijing to coax rain showers out of clouds before they reached the Olympic city in order to prevent rain during the opening and closing ceremonies. Whether this attempt was successful is a matter of dispute, with Roelof Brugentels, who leads the National Center for Atmospheric Research's Weather Modification Group, remarking that, quote, "we cannot make clouds or chase clouds away." There's an impact on environment and health. With an NFPA 704 health hazard rating of 2, silver iodide can cause temporary incapacitation or possible residual injury to humans and other mammals with intense or chronic exposure. However, there have been several detailed ecological studies that showed negligible environmental and health impacts. The toxicity of silver and silver compounds from silver iodide was shown to be of low order in some studies. These findings likely result from the minute amounts of silver generated by cloud seeding, which are about 1% of industry emissions into the atmosphere in many parts of the world, or individual exposure from tooth fillings. Accumulations in the soil, vegetation, and surface runoff have not been large enough to measure above natural background. A 1995 environmental assessment in the Sierra Nevada of California and a 2004 independent panel of experts in Australia confirmed these earlier findings. Quote, "in 1978, an estimated 3,000 tons, TONNES, of silver were released into the U.S. environment. This led the U.S. Health Services and EPA to conduct studies regarding the potential for environmental and human health hazards related to silver. These agencies and other state agencies applied the Clean Water Act of 1977 and 1987 to establish regulations on this type of pollution, end quote. Cloud seeding over, and I know I'm going to mispronounce this, Kosciuszko National Park, a biosphere reserve, is problematic in that several rapid changes of environmental legislation were made to enable the trial. Environmentalists are concerned about the uptake of elemental silver in a highly sensitive environment affecting the pygmy possum, among other species, as well as recent high-level algae blooms in once pristine glacial lakes. Research 50 years ago and analysis by the former Snowy Mountains Authority led to the cessation of the cloud seeding program in the 1950s with non-definitive results. Formerly, cloud seeding was rejected in Australia on environmental grounds because of concerns about the protected species, the pygmy possum. Since silver iodide and not elemental silver is the cloud seeding material, the claims of negative environmental impact are disputed by peer-reviewed research as summarized by the International Weather Modification Association. The history of cloud seeding. Louis Gathman in 1891 suggested shooting liquid carbon dioxide into rain clouds to cause them to rain. During the 1930s, the Bjorn-Findelson process theorized that supercooled water droplets present while ice crystals are released into rain clouds would cause rain. While researching aircraft icing, General Electric GE's Vincent Schaefer and Irving Langmuir confirmed the theory. Schaefer discovered the principle of cloud seeding in July 1946 through a series of serendipitous events, following ideas generated between him and Nobel laureate Langmuir while climbing Mount Washington in New Hampshire. Schaefer, Langmuir's research associate, created a way of experimenting with supercooled clouds using a deep freeze unit of potential agents to stimulate ice crystals' growth. For example, table salt, talcum powder, soils, dust, and various chemical agents with minor effect. Then one hot and humid July 14, 1946, he wanted to try a few experiments at GE's Schenectady Research Lab. He was dismayed to find the deep freezer was not cold enough to produce a cloud using breath air. He decided to move the process along by adding a chunk of dry ice just to lower the temperature of his experimental chamber. To his astonishment, as soon as he breathed into the deep freezer, he noted a bluish haze, followed by an eye-popping display of millions of microscopic ice crystals, reflecting the strong light rays from the lamp illuminating a cross-section of the chamber. He instantly realized that he had discovered a way to change supercooled water into ice crystals. The experiment was easily replicated, and he explored the temperature gradient to establish the -40 degrees Celsius limit for liquid water. Within the month, Schaefer's colleague, the atmospheric scientist Dr. Bernard Vonnegut, was credited with discovering another method for seeding supercooled cloud water. Vonnegut accomplished his discovery at the desk looking up information in a basic chemistry text and then tinkering with silver and iodide chemicals to produce silver iodide. Together with Professor Henry Chesson, SUNY, Albany, a crystallographer, he co-authored a publication in Science and received a patent in 1975. Both methods were adopted for use in cloud seeding during 1946 while working for GE in the state of New York. Schaefer's method altered a cloud's heat budget. Vonnegut's altered formative crystal structure, an ingenious property related to a good match in lattice constant between the two types of crystal. The crystallography of ice water played a role in Vonnegut's brother Kurt Vonnegut's novel, Cat's Cradle. The first attempt to modify natural clouds in the field through cloud seeding began during a flight that began in upstate New York on the 13th of November, 1946. Schaefer was able to cause snow to fall near Mount Greylock in western Massachusetts after he dumped 6 pounds of dry ice into the target cloud from a plane after a 60-mile easterly chase from the Schenectady County Airport. Dry ice and silver iodide agents are effective in changing the physical chemistry of supercooled clouds, thus useful in augmentation of winter snowfall over mountains and under certain conditions, in lightning and hail suppression. While not a new technique, hygroscopic seeding for enhancement of rainfall in warm clouds is enjoying a revival based on some positive indications from research in South Africa, Mexico, and elsewhere. The hygroscopic material most commonly used is table salt. It is postulated that hygroscopic seeding causes the droplet size spectrum in clouds to become more maritime, bigger drops, and less continental, stimulating rainfall through coalescence. From March 1967 until July 1972, the U.S. military's Operation Popeye cloud seeded silver iodide to extend the monsoon season over North Vietnam, especially the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The operation resulted in the targeted areas seeing an extension of the monsoon period, an average of 30 to 45 days. The 54th Weather Reconnaissance Squadron carried out the operation to, quote, make mud, not war, end quote. One private organization that offered during the 1970s to conduct weather modification, cloud seeding from the ground using silver iodide flares was Irving P. Crick and Associates of Palm Springs, California. They were contracted by Oklahoma State University in 1972 to conduct a seeding project to increase warm cloud rainfall in the Lake Carl Blackwell watershed. That lake was, at the time, 1972 to 73, the primary water supply for Stillwater, Oklahoma, and was dangerously low. The project did not operate for a long enough time to show statistically any change from natural variations. An attempt by the United States military to modify hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin using cloud seeding in the 1960s was called Project Storm Fury. Only a few hurricanes were tested with cloud seeding because of the strict rules set by the scientists of the project. It was unclear whether the project was successful. Hurricanes appeared to change slightly in structure, but only temporary. The fear that cloud seeding could potentially change the course or power of hurricanes and negatively affect people in the storm's path stopped the project. Two federal agencies have supported various weather modification research projects, which began in the early 1960s. The United States Bureau of Reclamation, Department of the Interior, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, Department of Commerce. Reclamation sponsored several cloud seeding research projects under the umbrella of Project Skywater from 1964 to 1988. And NOAA conducted the Atmospheric Modification Program from 1979 to 1993. The sponsored projects were carried out in several states and two countries, Thailand and Morocco, studying both winter and summer cloud seeding. From 1962 to 1998, Reclamation developed cloud seeding applied research to augment water supplies in the western U.S. The research focused on winter orographic seeding to enhance snowfall in the Rocky Mountains and Sierra Nevada and precipitation in coast ranges of Southern California. In California, Reclamation partnered with the California Department of Water Sources, CDWR, to sponsor the Sierra Cooperative Pilot Project, SCPP, based in Auburn, California, to conduct seeding experiments in the Central Sierra. The University of Nevada and Desert Research Institute provided cloud physics, physical chemistry, and other field support. The High Plains Cooperative Pilot Project, HIPLEX, HIPLEX, focused on convective cloud seeding to increase rainfall during the growing season in Montana, Kansas, and Texas from 1974 to 1979. In 1979, the World Meteorological Organization and other member states led by the government of Spain, conducted a precipitation enhancement project, PEP, in Spain, with inconclusive results due probably to location selection issues. Reclamation sponsored research at several universities, including Colorado State University, universities of Wyoming, Washington, UCLA, Utah, Chicago, NYU, Montana, Colorado, and research teams at Stanford, Meteorology Research, Inc., and Penn State University and South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, North Dakota, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma. Cooperative efforts with state water resources, agencies in California, Colorado, Montana, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and Arizona assured that the applied research met state water management needs. The High Plains Cooperative Pilot Project also engaged in partnerships with NASA, Environment Canada, and the National Center for Atmospheric Research, NCAR. More recently, in cooperation with 6 Western states, Reclamation sponsored a small cooperative research program called the Weather Damage Modification Program from 2002 to 2006. In the United States, funding for research has declined in the last 2 decades. However, the Bureau of Reclamation sponsored a 6-state research program from 2002 to 2006 called the Weather Damage Modification Program. A 2003 study by the United States National Academy of Sciences urges a national research program to clear up remaining questions about weather modifications, efficacy, and practice. In Australia, the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, CSIRO, conducted major trials between 1947 and the early 1960s. 1947 and 1952, CSIRO scientists dropped dry ice into the tops of cumulus clouds. The method worked reliably with clouds that were very cold, producing rain that would not have otherwise fallen. 1953 to 1956, CSIRO carried out similar trials in South Australia, Queensland, and other states. Experiments used both ground-based and airborne silver iodide generators. Late 1950s and early 1960s, cloud seeding in the Snowy Mountains on Cape York Peninsula in Queensland, in the New England district of New South Wales, and in Warragamba catchment area west of Sydney. Only the trial conducted in the Snowy Mountains produced statistically significant rainfall increases over the entire experiment. An Austrian study to use silver iodide seeding for hail prevention ran during 1981 to 2000, and the technique is still actively deployed there. There are various techniques in cloud seeding throughout the world, and I encourage you to check out those theories simply by looking them up. I do want to go into at least one little conspiracy theory about cloud seeding. Cloud seeding has been the focus of many theories based on the belief that governments manipulate the weather in order to control various conditions, including global warming, populations, military weapons, testing, public health, and flooding. What do you think? I've learned a little bit about cloud seeding and its effects. I guess I'm up in the air, just like all of you. Where is cloud seeding effective? Is it still going on? Is it working? Does it increase significantly the amount of precipitation in a certain area? What do you know about cloud seeding? Drop me some comments. Let me know what you think. This has been What Makes You Smarter. Thank you so much for joining me on the journey into learning, filling my noggin with knowledge. If you like the sound of my voice, stick around. We'll learn some more together. Also, if you'd like to tell your story or hear the stories of others, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. That's it for me. It's Keys Dan, RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com. Peace. I'm out of here. Peace. I'm out of here. Peace. I'm out of here. Peace. If you like what you hear, I encourage you to follow What Makes You Smarter on social media. Find it on Facebook at What Makes You Smarter, Instagram at What Makes You Smarter, Twitter at SmarterWhat, and YouTube username Keys Dan. Leave What Makes You Smarter podcast a review and subscribe. Listen to What Makes You Smarter podcast on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. My personal favorite, learn with me on my podcast, What Makes You Smarter. And if you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Call 501-470-6386 and leave a message to set up a time for What Makes You Famous. Support What Makes You Smarter podcast using the PayPal, paypal.me/KeysDan. Email info@radiowhat.com. What Makes You Smarter is a production of Keys Dan Enterprises Incorporated at keysdan.com. Thank you for listening.